Hello and welcome back to PredictIt Live, only on Old Bull TV, your exclusive source for real-time coverage of the stock market for politics. In the virtual studio with me today are Pratik Chougule from Spangled Gamblers and Gaeten Dugas, who is swimming Scrooge McDuck style in a pool of riches from a trade that he actually tipped you to on the show earlier this week. Pratik and Gaeten have new picks for you today, plus we're looking at the new markets that PredictIt just launched, and if the spirit moves us, we might take some of your questions. As always, we are hooking up new traders with a cool $25 to get started. I think we're going to make some money today, so let's get to it. Welcome back, political traders. I'm your host, Flip Pidot, and what a day it's been already. There were absolute gobs of money to be made for those paying attention to the right sources, and we're about to get into all of it. But first, we want to make sure that everyone has got their PredictIt machine up and running. So if you haven't yet opened your account, take a minute to go to predictit.org/promo/oldbull25. That deposit match will get you up to $25 in free hard cash to get started trading. Also, surely by now you've already subscribed to the channel, but just in case you've forgotten, here's your reminder to hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we go live. And if you have a question for the panel today, you know the drill, ask away in the chat. Now let's bring in today's panel. Pratik Chougule is back. You know him as the proprietor of Spangled Gamblers, a website and podcast that you have no excuse not to follow if you are on PredictIt, and the $1 million man himself, Gaeten Dugas. But before we deign to unmute them, please be advised that all content and opinions presented herein, whether by hosts or guests, are for informational purposes only, should not be construed as investment or other advice. The host and guests may hold or plan to trade positions in the markets being discussed. Okay, Gaeten, let's start with you. Tell us about what happened this morning at the House Republican Conference meeting.
Sure. So it was the vote for the new leader, and Stefanik, or however you pronounce her name, did not get as many votes as a lot of people thought that she would. So B1 was the big winner. And if listeners or viewers followed my advice on Wednesday, they would have made some good money. What I had said on Wednesday was to invest in BMAX no. And the reason I said that was just based on the incentives, whereas the incentive for the Cheney vote was to get it done as quickly as possible. The incentive was different for the vote this morning. They wanted to make sure that everybody felt like their voice was heard, even though not all of them were going to support the result. Allowing them to vote against it is a good thing politically. So that was a pretty good call. Made some money on that. But in addition to that, if you follow my Twitter account, what I did yesterday was I actually maxed no on the losing bracket kind of late in the day. And what I did was I followed the media narrative. There's kind of a media narrative going that they had a meeting last night and she convinced a bunch of people to switch, but it didn't show up in the end results. And it's kind of a warning to not follow that media narrative. A lot of times it doesn't reflect the actual results. And this morning Punchbowl put out a newsletter, and they said that they expected about 75% support, which is, if everybody was there, was going to be B1 anyway. So I was able to get out of that position at a profit. And in fact, you could even buy the winning shares at single digits during the vote if you were paying attention and had put your trust in that Punchbowl newsletter. So lots of money to be made this morning. I did fairly well.
Yeah, it was interesting actually where the brackets wound up being tuned, with the lowest one being 159 or fewer. And usually the lowest bracket is sort of a proxy for, the vote failing, or in this case, her not being elected chair, even though 159, that being the upper bound of that lower bracket, was, as you say, that's not just a majority of the House conference, but with 211 members in the House Republican Conference, 159 is almost exactly 75%. And as you were saying, Punchbowl was reporting that she seemed to have about 75% support. Would have meant if everyone voted, it likely still would have been the minimum bracket. And of course, not everyone voted. There were about 30 or 35 abstentions or protest votes or not show up votes. So it was comfortably below that 159 threshold. And so anyone that saw that coming, I mean, this was a huge windfall for if you had maxed out in the bottom bracket. It went from 10 or 11 cents to $1. Almost in an instant this morning. So this was a really big profit opportunity, and you didn't necessarily have to land on that bottom bracket and make that whatever 9x return to make a tidy profit here. Again, as you were pointing out earlier in the week, simply going short, buying the no side on the maximum bracket, the 200 plus vote bracket, was a good way to clean up with quite a lot less risk too. And you sort of laid out why this would probably go differently from the Cheney ouster vote earlier in the week, which did resolve at 200 plus because it was effectively a voice vote, effectively unanimous. That this was a different proposition that they were asking the conference of, and I guess for a lot of people, more of a statement on, are they continuing to throw in with Trump or not? So that was a profitable insight. Hopefully some of the viewers followed you into this trade and will be enjoying weekend flush with cash, as you will be. Pratik, did you get in on any of Gaeten's action on this market?
I didn't actually. We were recording very late, and I had made a mental note to get in no on the B max, and I just never got around to it. So should have followed Gaeten.
Well, that's all right. This is another day. We've got new markets up on the board, new opportunities to profit. So let's jump into a couple of them here. There are 3 new markets that just went up in the last hour or so on PredictIt. The first one we're going to talk about is this Atlanta mayoral election market. This is a mayoral election for this year, this November. The system in Atlanta is nonpartisan, so there's no primary, at least in the traditional sense. There's just a general election on November 2nd. But then if there's no majority winner, it goes to a runoff later in the month between the top 2 candidates. And in terms of the kind of backstory here, you may be familiar with it. The incumbent mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, sort of a rising Democratic star. She was heralded as a potential VP pick even for Biden. She was one of Biden's first and most prominent early supporters. He quite notably held a fundraiser, I think his first ever presidential fundraiser for Bottoms just 2 months ago when she was still presumably running for re-election for mayor. She suddenly, just a week ago, announced, I'm not actually going to run for re-election. No one really saw this coming. And there's been a lot of speculation as to why. Does she have her eye on running for governor in Georgia next year? Is she going to join the Biden administration? Although, a couple months ago, it was reported that Biden was looking at her as HUD secretary or chair of the SBA or another cabinet post, and she turned it down, apparently. So that would be a bit of a perhaps unexpected reversal if she wound up joining the administration. There's also speculation that she just felt she might not win. So a lot of her supporters, very notable supporters, have turned on her. In fact, the former mayor, Kasim Reed, who endorsed her, and she had endorsed him, I believe supported him when he ran for his second term now 8 years ago, is now one of her fiercest critics. And they point at the rising violent crime rates, her being out of touch with the community. The president of the city council is also running against her, and quite avowedly sort of an anti-Bottoms campaign. So in her letter to the city, when she announced that she was not running for re-election, she addressed this. She said, "Am I afraid? No, I am not afraid. I've never, cowered from a fight or from the challenges. I just am sort of thinking about what's next, and I don't know if I'm going to run for office. I don't know what I'm going to do, but suddenly I just am not interested in running for re-election, even though I clearly was, a couple of months ago." So who knows why Bottoms has bowed out, but she has. So this market that's now up on the site, you're looking at it here. Don't worry too much about the prices you see here. These are not really coherent prices. The market is still very thinly traded right now, but that's why this is a great time for you to get in to the market before it develops any real consensus. So some names to really be focused on this market. You see Keisha Bottoms up there. You don't want to buy her. She's not running. I guess, you never know what may change, but she wouldn't be worth any more than a penny or so as a real, wild card outside chance lotto ticket. But the other names to look at here are Mary Norwood at the top there. I think she was trading, first trade print was 67 cents, which is nonsense. Don't worry about that. It's just a very wide bid ask spread. But you want to look at Mary Norwood. You want to look at Kasim Reed, who I mentioned is the former mayor, and Felicia Moore, who's the president of the city council. So again, a bit of backstory on these 3 candidates. Norwood interestingly, she lost in a really close race in the runoff against Bottoms 4 years ago in 2017, and she lost by I think 0.7 or 0.8%. So very close race. 8 years prior, she ran against Kasim Reed, the former mayor, two-term mayor, and lost by the same very thin margin, 0.7 or 0.8. She got something like 49.6% of the vote both times in the runoff. And in fact, in 2009, when she ran against Reed, she was the top vote getter in the first round. So this is someone who's run citywide successfully, not being elected citywide, but she's run. She's been top voter getter. She's gotten to the runoff twice, 2 out of 2 times. She's a former council member. She has been running for another council seat this cycle before Bottoms exited the race. She hasn't announced that she's going to now run for mayor again, but she would presumably be one of the the most formidable, if not the most formidable candidate. Another interesting thing about Norwood is she's the only one on this list who's not a Democrat, or at least she's the only one of the really kind of credible, strong challengers who's not a Democrat. Now, obviously, Atlanta is a very heavily Democratic city, but when you've got the jungle primary, and you've got maybe 10 candidates or maybe a half dozen really credible candidates, if they're all splitting up the vote pretty evenly, then even if only a third of the city is Republican, and she's not a Republican, she's an independent, but if she sort of sticks out as the least left-wing, least progressive, least Democratic friendly candidate, that may be enough of a niche, and that may be why she's done so well in the prior elections to be that top vote, because you can be top vote getter with 25-30% of the vote in the first round. So I would really look at Norwood carefully. I think she probably deserves to have the highest price on this list. Now, again, that shouldn't be 67, but it maybe should be something like 30. Again, if she runs, and she will presumably make it to the runoff, and even if she's not elected, if she makes it to the runoff, you would see presumably a nice pop in her price in early November. So the second one, as I mentioned, Felicia Moore, president of the city council. She has already been running against Bottoms since before Bottoms bowed out. Again, very aggressively. She obviously has very good name recognition in the city. She's also importantly got a fundraising lead on everyone else. She's got, I think, about $500,000 in the bank. So it's not a huge lead if someone else comes in and aggressively fundraises in a city the size of Atlanta, but she does have a little bit of a head start here 6 months out. And the third, again, is Kasim Reed. So this is former 2-term mayor. He was term limited out in 2017, but the term limits are only for successive terms. So he can now run again. And it really looks like he is running. In fact, he has not announced. He's being kind of coy about it. But even before Bottoms made her announcement, he was sort of, making what seemed to be moves to sort of get set up. In fact, that one local Atlanta publication reported on what seemed to be a push poll that the Reed campaign, or not campaign, but supporters of Reed had put out. And it's interesting here. It said they quoted one of the questions from the poll. It asked whether you would vote for a candidate focused on national partisan political issues and is a warrior on social justice, or local nonpartisan issues that has a plan to address crime, education, and jobs. So clearly this Reed supporting push poll was trying to draw a contrast between her being, too big for her britches, not focused on Atlanta, focused on national issues and sort of more far left campaign stance while again, drawing into further contrast the fact that violent crime rate has gone up so much under Bottoms. Interestingly, Reed presided over some corruption scandals too, and he's been out in recent days sort of apologizing for those scandals. So it really looks like he's making the final moves to get ready to announce. So I would want to be in probably all three of these names, depending on where the bid asks settle out. Surely any of them that you can get for less than, say, 20 cents, I think is a deal. Norwood maybe as high as 30. But again, for the likes of Norwood and Reed, again, Moore is already running. She's the one of these three that's already announced. For Norwood and Reed, you get a first bump when they announce. And in Reed's case in particular, Norwood may be happy just running for council. Reed in particular, I'd be shocked if he doesn't wind up running. So I would jump into Reed shares now. Not at any price, but sort of see where this settles out. If you can get it around 20, 25, that seems like a decent deal to then, expect the bump when he announces, whatever that might be. So that's sort of the way I'm looking at this field. Again, it's tough to make exact recommendations before the prices come out. I see Norwood now has a print down at 25, so it's starting to get a little bit more normal. But you probably want to wait to either put in a low bid and hope that someone fills it, or wait for the order book to narrow. You definitely don't want to buy, at the market price. You want to submit the equivalent of a market order, because you'd be buying her at 63 cents at this point. So that's sort of Atlanta in a nutshell. Pratik and Gaeten, I don't know if you guys have been looking at this race at all, but you have any sense of sort of what's going on behind the scenes here in terms of speculation on what's going on with Bottoms, why she jumped out, if she's afraid of any of these particular candidates, or if this is just more to do with, Biden administration intrigue?
I don't have any insight on that. Just some general strategy, though, is that Alex Perella, no way that I don't even know if that's a guy or a girl, but no way that person wins. So if you're going to build a negative risk position in this market, there's some shares out there now. There probably won't be for very long.
Mm-hmm.
But that's I mean, if you're just going to invest in one candidate, don't do that, because you're only going to make like $8. But if you plan on building a negative risk position where you're going to buy all the no's, you might not have very many chances to purchase that bracket.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you want to take this opportunity to give folks that may not be aware of it a really quick primer on what negative risk is?
Yeah, negative risk is when you buy more than one no bracket in a single market, only one can lose, basically, because only one of the brackets is going to resolve yes. So when you buy more than one no bracket, instead of it costing you money, what they do is they adjust the amount invested in the market by the amount of the winnings that you would win in the lower, like if you're buying 99-cent shares, they're going to credit you $7.72 if you've already got 80-cent shares in a different bracket. So what you can do is if over time you keep buying low-priced no brackets, eventually you can get it so that your investment is actually negative in a market, because they keep returning the potential winnings to you when you buy it, and then you basically have a risk-free investment.
Yeah, that's about the size of it. Yeah, the more, as you put it, the key here is that one and only one of these brackets will resolve as yes. Sometimes they can all resolve as no. But if you're buying multiple no shares, multiple no positions, no more than one of them can be wrong. Because only at most one of these can resolve as yes. So you're actually making a less concentrated bet, effectively, the more candidates you buy no in within the same market. And so PredictIt, when they're calculating your maximum potential loss, that actually goes down as you start to invest in no across multiple different candidates in a linked market. And if you do it at advantageous prices, sort of opportunistically, you can get that max loss down to less than zero, at which point you've effectively guaranteed yourself a profit no matter what happens. Pratik, is that something that you hunt for? Do sort of this negative risk arbitrage, or is that not part of your general strategy?
Yeah, no, there's certainly a time and place for it. I mean, I would say on the Atlanta race in particular, I haven't dug into the details yet, but I do think, just given what I know about these kinds of races in general at this phase, it's almost tough to get in early, because unless you're really in Atlanta and immersed in the local political scenes, there's always just information in more informal networks that that just people know about before they break into even political blogs and other things that sort of people like us have access to on the outside.
Yeah.
So I would just be very cautious in before, kind of be aware that there are probably people in these markets who have an insider edge.
Yeah, that's good advice for virtually any market on the site, but certainly applies to this one. So one of the other markets that might be worth taking a look at is this Murkowski reelect market that just went up on PredictIt. Pratik or Gaeten, you have any thoughts on this? It's currently trading at 78 cents. Does that seem about right?
I would say that I don't have a strong thesis as to why. I mean, that price seems about efficient now. My advice here would be not to get in at the current price, but just wait for some incident where Murkowski is seen as bucking the party or taking a tough vote or something letting the markets dip a little bit, and then maybe buy yes on a dip. But I wouldn't get in at the current price.
Gaten, you agree? Look for your more attractive entry price, but
Yeah, I
ultimately
agree.
put on some yes shares.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically will Murkowski run? I think she's proven herself to be a winner in Alaska, even when the party is against her. So if she's running, I wouldn't want to.
Right.
I wouldn't want to bet against her, but I also don't have the patience to wait a year and a half for a market to resolve. So I'd sit this one out for now.
Yeah. All right, let's turn to some panel picks. Gaten, I want to start with you. Now that you've got a real legacy to defend here with this Stefanik pick. Let's see what you got for us today.
Yeah, this one might not be as impressive, but what I'm looking at are the two Gaetz markets with the September 1st date, and what's happened in the last couple of days, well, yesterday and then into today, is that this news about Joel Greenberg changing his plea is coming out. And while it's technically news because they're confirming it, it's not surprising at all. We've known this since early April that May 15th was the deadline. But even though it wasn't surprising, the markets have still reacted. Yes on the committee dropped from 40 to 35 cents, and yes on resignation went from 19 to 24 cents. And I expect more news to come out. Right now, the news is saying he will change his position, and in the coming days, that's going to change. He did put in a guilty plea, so even though that none of this is surprising, it is keeping the Gaetz name in the news. Prices are reflecting that. My two recommendations are to buy no on resignation around 75. So that's reflecting the drop from 81 to about 76, 75, based on the news so far. I think once the news cycle ends, it's going to bounce back probably into the 80s, and I'd sell at that time. You can also do the same if you can get the yes on committee in the lower 30s. Again, the prices have reacted to this news. Once the news cycle moves on, they'll likely bounce back, and you can get that money. I'm not going to hold any positions on this, as this is more of a playing the news market. But if you did want to hold, I think resignation is safer. Like even if he gets indicted, there's no guarantee that he won't fight and say, no, I'm not going to resign, and then force the House to expel him. But on the committee side, it only takes a majority of Congress of the House to remove him from a committee. Not even a majority of Republicans, just a majority of the House. So if Democrats want him gone, they can get rid of him. So I'd be wary about holding the yes on committee all the way through September.
Pratik, do politicians not have to resign anymore from Cuomo to Gaetz? What's going on? How can you be entering a guilty plea and be sitting at 24 cents to resign in the next 4 months?
Yeah, I've basically been advocating for, obviously you don't want to buy when there's a lively news cycle, but whenever the news cycle goes away a little bit and Gaetz isn't imminently in the news, I've been recommending to try to buy yes shares in the resign market. So for example, I had bought up a bunch at around 20% and just flipped them on the news. I'm probably going to give this one maybe a day or so, just kind of let the news cycle calm down a bit, and then try to put in some buy orders in the low 20s on the resign market. Again, not with any intention of holding all the way through, basically just keep flipping and turning those every time there's a bad news cycle for Gaetz. But no, I wouldn't, to answer your question, I mean, more generally on politicians resigning, I am wary of drawing any kind of hard conclusion that we're now just in a new era where politicians don't have to resign, simply because I think that even if they may not have the honor or the will or so forth to want to resign, the reality is that it is a bargaining chip when you're dealing with prosecutors. And at the end of the day, resigning office isn't a bad deal if it keeps you out of jail.
Fair enough. Pratik, what pick do you have for us today?
So I wanted to talk about the Arizona Republican Senate primary. I think if you're interested in basically the Republican Civil War, and you like markets that are uncertain, volatile, so forth, there's certainly a lot of money to be made here. There's a lot we could talk about here, but I think the big thing now to watch for is that there are very clearly some overzealous bettors on Blake Masters. Masters, for those who don't know, is a young guy. He's involved in Peter Thiel's companies, and Thiel is putting a lot of money behind him. But what was a little bit bizarre over the last couple of weeks is that that there was relatively little liquidity. Masters wasn't trading particularly high, and then someone just randomly came in and bought up the entire order book, brought him up all the way to 97%, which is obviously an absurdity. He's now down to 37%. I mean, the big question, for one thing, I think you have to assume that the market generally is mispriced for the simple reason that at least one candidate who is very likely to the race, Jim Land, an entrepreneur, is even listed in the market. I'm not exactly sure why, but if and when PredictIt adds it into the market, that'll move the prices a little bit. There are also just questions about who's actually going to run. I think a big question is whether Doug Ducey, the current governor of Arizona, is going to run. His decision on whether or not to run is going to impact the odds of Mark Brnovich, the Attorney General, who I think would be a strong candidate if he gets in. So I guess the short story here is my recommendation would be to try to get no on Masters if you can get him in the 50s. It's not that he's not a serious candidate, he is, but if you can get him in the 50s at this point, it's probably not a bad deal. I would also recommend going no if you can get him no shares in the 70s on Andy Biggs. He has a lot of enemies, more establishment, moderate circles. And then I would also try to get in no on in the low 90s, ideally in the high 80s if you can, on Kelly Ward. I think my guess is that some traders are thinking that Trump may endorse her. I'm not convinced that's the case. I think she's just a little bit too polarizing to get through. And also, if you can get her in the low 90s, that's sort of lays a good foundation for building a negative risk position if you decide to play that game here.
So you're looking to build no positions, it sounds like, on each of these, Masters, Biggs, and Ward at the right price. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think Brnovich is he may be underpriced here at 12%. So I may place a small order trying to get him at 12%. I mean, the risk here is that he ends up not running, but I think that if he does get in, he's relatively well positioned to consolidate support across the factions in the Arizona Republican Party.
I guess I've never seen it written out. This name, Mark Brnovich, that's an astounding spelling of that name. I thought that was a typo on PredictIt's part when I looked at it, but no, that's actually how it's spelled. How do you like that? Gaeten, what do you think? You have a favorite horse in this race?
Not jumping into this one yet. If I were to play this one, what I'd do is I'd set up some alerts on Ducey and some other keyword terms so that if he does announce, I could jump in cheaply. But for now, I'm sitting this one out.
Pratik, you have an idea of where his price pops to if he announces?
Doug Ducey?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting question because for people who have been following Arizona politics, I mean, Ducey has basically all but, I mean, he and Trump are not on good terms. And I think that if Ducey were to get in, that dramatically increases the likelihood of Trump taking a real interest in the race and trying to prop up some kind of a challenger to Ducey. So I think you see a real civil war within the Arizona Republican Party. At the current, my gut here, I don't really have a strong kind of evidence for what I'm going to say, but I followed Ducey for a long time. I met him a long time ago. I've never gotten the impression that he's especially itching to go to Washington. I mean, I think he very much had entered politics wanting to be governor. So I don't at all take it for granted that he's actually going to run, but I also don't want to pay, whatever, 80 something percent on that. So I'm just kind of waiting to see what happens there. If he doesn't run, I won't be surprised at all. But even if he does run, I don't at all take it as a given that he'll actually get through the primary.
So unless I missed it, I don't think you like any of the candidates on the board here, do you?
I think that you could make an argument for Lotto's for Kimberly Yee. She's kind of an intriguing candidate. I mean, she's involved in Arizona politics. She has a good electoral record. There's no guarantee she's going to run, but she's also perhaps someone with establishment credentials who wouldn't be obviously problematic for sort of the more MAGA wing. I mean, I think if you have a high risk tolerance, you don't mind the risk of just going to zero, maybe you can put in buy orders at 5% on her. But yeah, I mean, right now in general, I'm just kind of hoping to get some nodes at optimal prices.
Yeah. Okay. Well, folks, take a closer look at this market if it's one you want to start dabbling in. If Pratik is right, you have some opportunities to be opportunistic in picking up a handful of no shares on some of these more prominent candidates. Pratik and Gaeten disagree, I think it's fair to say, on the Gaetz resignation. Pratik's thinking that might be undervalued, while Gaeten look for an opportunity to get short somewhere maybe in the low 70s. Judiciary, I'm not sure I heard any disagreement over the likelihood that he will be bounced from that committee, just given that's an easier political accomplishment. Again, I would take a look at this Atlanta market, and I'm just going to refresh it for myself too, to see if the pricing has gotten any more reasonable. Not really. So the highest bid for, and I'm not sure if we have it back on screen yet. We do. Great. So you can see it says best offer 77 on Norwood. That means the highest bid on Norwood is 23 cents. I think that's right about where you would want to get in. And it's not to say you could get filled at 23. You've got nearly a 40-cent wide bid ask spread here. So the bids may wind up creeping up towards 25, 30, which is, I think, sort of top end of what you'd want to pay. But, again, before it gets liquid here, you can try and make the market. So you might want to put in a bid alongside that 23. Maybe you'll get filled. Same thing, Felicia Moore, highest bid is 13. Kasim Reed, 15. If you could get filled at those prices, I think that would be pretty attractive at any of these three. So this may be the opportunity to do it with a little bit more comfort, a little bit more cushion, put in a bid alongside these. But again, you want to be mindful of watching how the market sort of unfolds as it's in it's sort of incubating phase here, just out of the box, because these spreads will tighten up, and they could be towards the middle of the spread, they could be toward the top or toward the bottom. So you may quickly get pushed down deep into the order book if this tightens away from you. But keep an eye on this one. Again, I think those are the three main ones to watch. There are another handful of names out there that could become meaningful, but these are three that I think any one of them assuming that they're running, has a really good chance of getting through to the runoff at least. And again, in Reed's case, while he hasn't announced, I think it's all but certain that he will. And you can expect to see a pop when he does. So you want to be able to get in before that happens, as long as you can get filled at a sufficiently attractive price. But with that, I think we're actually going to get you guys out of here a little bit more timely fashion than we have earlier in the week. Everyone enjoy your weekend. We're going to wrap up the panel. Pratik, thank you for joining us. Everyone go check out starspangledgamblers.com. Gaeten, thank you. Congrats again on the great Stefanik call. Viewers, don't forget to collect that $25 at PredictIt.org/promo/OldBull25. Find us on Twitter at OldBullTV. Thank you for watching. Happy trading, happy weekend, and we'll see you next time.